with the platform so that you just leave feeling empowered to explore its full potential. All right, so how are we going to do that? Well, we've got a good amount to cover today in just about an hour, and we definitely want to leave some time for questions. So we'll start by just taking a step back and talking about what large language models actually are. And I think that this is a really critical first step in being able to understand how you can work and converse with them through prompting. Then we'll dive into our main focus today, which is what prompting means, how to build prompts to get the most out of ChatGPT, and some advanced techniques that will help you take those prompting skills to the next level. And then finally, we'll get a little bit hands-on and just share one easy way for all of you to immediately start building some prompts that will hopefully help you in your day-to-day work before we close out with our Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. Now, before we jump into prompting techniques, I think it is worth taking just a quick minute to talk about how to use ChatGPT responsibly. So while this is a very powerful tool, it is still just that, a tool. And it works best when we really pair it with thoughtful human oversight. So start by being mindful of what you put into ChatGPT. Avoid sharing any personal, confidential, or proprietary information unless you're using a workspace with enterprise privacy protections, and most importantly, your organization's policies allow it. It's also important to always keep a human in the loop, especially for really important or high stakes work. So ChatGPT can sometimes be inaccurate or outdated because it's generating responses based on patterns in its training data, not always live knowledge. So always double check critical facts with trusted sources, and then use the built-in thumbs up or thumbs down button in order to flag anything that looks off to you. Another thing to watch for is bias or perspective. So since the model learns from data created by humans that lives in the public domain, some of those biases can show up in chat's responses. So it's important to always treat outputs as drafts and read them really critically, adjusting the language whenever needed. And for anything that involves legal, medical, or financial decisions, ChatGPT should never be your final stop. It is not a licensed expert, and its advice won't always be specific to your situation, especially depending on the prompts that you put in. So you can certainly use it as a starting point in these domains, but again, always confirm important details with qualified professionals, or again, follow your organization's established processes. I think that transparency is also really key here. So if your workplace or school expects you to disclose when AI tools are used, make sure you keep logs or links to your conversations so that others can see how ChatGPT contributed. And if you're capturing someone else's voice or data, say through record mode or file uploads, make sure that you have their consent and that, again, you're following those internal organizational policies. Your feedback is also incredibly important. So when something feels unsafe, inaccurate, or off topic, make sure that you flag it so that we can leverage that feedback to really help improve the experience for everyone. And lastly, when you need the most up-to-date information, you can proactively turn on search or deep research, which will allow ChatGPT to pull from those current sources. But it's still important to go check on the links, check those citations, and verify the details. And one easy way that you can always make sure that you're leveraging in your prompt is to just tell chat to make sure that it's referencing the most up-to-date information, and that will automatically invoke the search tool. So these are just some simple guardrails to help ensure that AI is used safely and responsibly so that it really complements our work instead of replacing good judgment. All right, now that we've covered the guardrails for using AI responsibly, let's take a look at how these systems actually work. I think understanding what's happening under the hood of a large language model will help you see why prompting matters so much. Instead of thinking about prompts just as questions, it helps to really take a step back and first understand what a large language model, or LLM, actually is. So an LLM is a system that's trained on vast amounts of text data, from books and articles to conversations and even code. And rather than memorizing answers like a call and response chatbot, it's actually learning patterns in language. So, how words and ideas tend to appear together. And then it uses those patterns to generate responses that sound both natural and relevant. So, in simple terms, when you give ChatGPT an input, which is what's represented on the left side of this diagram, the model, or the brain in this illustration, analyzes your words, then considers the surrounding context, and predicts the next most likely word one step at a time in order to form a complete response, which is what then comes out on the right. So while we are really simplifying the process here, this is actually powered by billions of parameters. And for the more technical folks in the audience, these are the mathematical weights that have been fine-tuned to capture the nuances of language, relationships between concepts, and even reasoning patterns. So again, in very simple terms, the quality of the output is heavily influenced by how clearly you set the context and guide the model through your input or prompt. And this baseline understanding is really crucial for prompting. So with that foundation in mind, let's take a quick look at how the model actually makes these types of predictions. Again, very simple illustration here of how the model predicts text, which is a process known as inference. So suppose we give the model the sentence, "It's a beautiful day in the blank." The model doesn't actually know the correct answer. In fact, LLMs don't actually know anything at all in the way that humans do, but it's learned from its training data which words are most likely to follow in this phrase. So it considers all possible completions and actually assigns probabilities to each option. And in this example, it might think neighborhood is the most likely word at 25%, but it also considers all other possible options like park or city. And the model then chooses the highest probability word to continue that sentence and repeats this prediction process step by step, building a longer, more coherent response. And understanding this helps us really appreciate why those prompts matter. The clearer and more specific the input, the easier it's going to be for the model to narrow down the probabilities and produce the results that you as the end user actually want. A vague prompt is going to leave the model guessing between too many equally likely directions, while a really precise and detailed one guides it to that next word prediction and your desired outcome in particular. Now, when we talk about ChatGPT in particular, it's also important to understand that OpenAI offers different types of models, and those different models each have their own unique strength. So on one side, we have, what we've traditionally called the GPT series models. These are going to be the fast, versatile generalists. They're really good at tasks like writing, summarizing, answering questions, and even generating creative content. So you can think of these as like your quick, all-purpose assistants that are fast, fluent, and from a token perspective, really cost efficient. On the other side, we have what we call reasoning models. So in the GPT-5 world, these are going to be 5 Thinking and 5 Pro. And these are designed for deeper thinking and multi-step problem solving. They basically think out loud and work through logic step by step, which makes them ideal for those tasks that require more accuracy, structured reasoning, or really strategic planning. And they are slower and more compute intensive, but they often deliver stronger results for those more complex challenges. So why does this matter for prompting? Well, choosing the right tool and model is the first step in crafting an effective prompt. And even the most carefully written prompt won't shine if the model isn't suited for the task at hand. So again, if you need quick ideas or creative drafts, GPT-5, the baseline model, is going to be perfect. But if you know that your prompt involves more complex reasoning or multi-step analysis, you might know off the bat that you want to start with one of those reasoning models to set you up for success. And I think the really key takeaway from this is that prompting is not just about the words that you use, it's also about selecting the right tool for the job. And this combination of model choice and strong prompting is what's going to unlock the best results at the end of the day. Now, this used to be a much bigger challenge for end users, but thanks to GPT-5, you actually won't need to worry about switching models in a lot of scenarios. So GPT-5 is our smartest model yet, and if you just leave it on the auto mode, it can actually decide how long it needs to think for your prompt in particular. So for example, if you ask it to help you draft an email response, it will likely just start answering. If you want to force longer thinking, you can proactively switch to GPT-5 thinking, or for really highly advanced tasks, you can use GPT-5 Pro. So if you know that you're looking for a more strategic analysis, or you just really want to make sure that chat slows down and takes its time to give you a better answer, proactively turn on that thinking mode. Or if you know that you want research grade intelligence and you don't mind waiting a longer period, switch to Pro for a really detailed analysis and higher precision results. Just keep in mind that thinking and Pro both incur credits, and the availability of those credits is dependent on which version of ChatGPT you have. But if you ever run out of credits for the month or the billing period, auto mode will just default to instant until that pool of credits refreshes for your account. So with this limitation in mind, it is especially important to use strong prompts whenever you are invoking the reasoning models like Thinking or Pro, because you have a limited availability of access to those models. All right, let's now get more into prompting in particular so that everyone here feels more confident getting the best out of each of those prompts. And I want to start with just a foundational question of what exactly is prompting. To put it simply, prompting is how we give instructions to a large language model to guide its response. That's it. Now, you'll hear a lot of people use the phrase prompt engineering. And personally, I stray away from that term because it makes this feel like a really technical discipline, like that you need a computer science degree in order to get right. And from my perspective and experience, that could not be further from the truth. At its core, prompting is not at all about engineering, but it's about communication. And what matters most is not your ability to write code, but your ability to give clear, thoughtful instructions. You can think of it more like giving directions to a really smart intern. The more specific you are, the better output that you're going to get. Now, you'll notice that I have a screenshot from my actual ChatGPT conversation up here on the right, where I just asked, what is prompting? And you'll notice that I didn't use any jargon. I just asked a plain language question, and the model responded with a clear, structured explanation. And this is the essence of prompting. You give it context, goals, or constraints, and it helps you then think, write, analyze, or create. It's really more about collaboration than it is about like a command line. So if you have ever written an email, given feedback, or even just asked a thoughtful question, you already have the foundational skills to be really great at this. So we'll build from here, but it all starts with that simple idea that prompting is just communicating with clarity. And when it comes to crafting a prompt, the best inputs tend to have three key ingredients. They specify a task, they provide context, and they clarify the desired output. So I think it helps, to think of a real world scenario. Imagine that you have a new intern or graduate student who needs to perform a specific task. If you provide vague instructions, such as analyze some marketing data, the outcome might not meet your expectations. But if you offer detailed analogy applies to creating prompts for ChatGPT as well. So effective prompts typically include clear tasks where you explain, analyze, summarize whatever the task might be. They give ample context as to the persona and the context knowledge, and then they give a description of the desired output format. And the clearer that you are in all of these components, the better your results are ultimately going to be. So let's walk through an example here of how a simple prompt can be improved step by step. We'll start with the OK prompt. So tell me about, walk through an example here. And the clearer that you are in all of these components, we'll start with the OK prompt. So tell me about perennial gardening. This is a valid request, but it's vague. The model will give a really generic overview that might be useful, but it's not going to be tailored to your needs. It's like asking a gardener to tell you about plants. You'll get a broad answer that may or may not apply to your situation and what you're looking to learn more about. Next, we see what would be a better prompt. So in this scenario, I am a novice gardener living in Northern Virginia. Tell me about perennial gardening. I'm interested in planting some perennials in a 10-foot by 10-foot flower bed in front of my house. Here, we've added a couple of sentences that give more context and a persona. And the model will now understand my skill level, location, and the size of a garden that I'm actually working with. And this will help it give advice that's more specific to both my climate, my experience, and the amount of land that I have to work with. And already, just by adding a little bit of context, you'll see a dramatic improvement in the response that you get. But finally, we get to what we would consider to be the best version of this prompt. So in this scenario, we keep all of the first part of the prompt the same, but we also then tell it to provide a beginner's guide to perennial gardening in my area with step-by-step instructions. And I also want it to include a list of recommended plants for my area, a shopping list of supplies that I need to buy, and so on. So here we're not just asking for information, we're actually telling the model exactly how we want that information structured. We want a guide, step-by-step instructions, recommended plants, and even a shopping list. And the result is, in this scenario, going to be a response that feels like it was written just for you because it was written just for you. And this progression from okay to better to best shows what I would consider to be the single most important principle of prompting. The more context, structure, and detail that you provide, the more powerful and actionable the output will be. So prompting, you also have to keep in mind that prompting is not about getting the perfect answer on the first try. It's all about iteration. And realistically, in practice, we bring user expectations and model output closer together through a cycle of refining and adjusting our prompts. And in order to do this effectively, you have to think of this like a real conversation. So I would hope that most people would never ask, a colleague one question, dislike their answer, and then just walk away. Instead, what most people would do is ask follow-up questions, maybe rephrase their question or add more context until that other person got the clarity that they need to answer in a compelling way to really give you what you're looking for. And ChatGPT works the exact same way. It responds best when you treat it like a back and forth dialogue rather than a one and done query. So at the top here, we start with user expectations, what you want from the model. And below that, we have the model's initial output, which may or may not hit the mark on the first try. But the middle path, which is your process, is where you refine your prompt, add details, or shift your instructions to guide the model toward the answer that you're looking for. So I would say if you take one thing away from today's session, just remember that great prompting is iterative. Just like a good conversation, it's a series of interactions that move you closer to the result that you want. All right, now it's time to look at some techniques that really will help you close the gap between what you ask for and what the model delivers, both faster and more effectively. So think of these as tools that you can use to guide ChatGPT toward your ideal output without having to go through as much trial and error. And there are literally dozens of tools and techniques out there around prompting, but today we're just going to focus on three that I find to be really helpful and impactful in my day-to-day work. So those are meta prompting, few shot prompting, and then chain of thought prompting. So first up, and this one is probably my personal favorite, is meta prompting. So meta prompting is all about using the model itself to improve the way that you ask questions. Instead of just trying to come up with the perfect prompt on your own, you can ask ChatGPT, what's the best way to phrase this question to get the output that I want? For example, on this slide, you can see an example of a user that's asking the model how to best phrase a request for creative writing exercises. And this approach is really helpful because it saves time and often generates really creative or unexpected prompt ideas that we might not naturally think of. You can ask using the model itself. So first up, in my day-to-day, dozens of tools and techniques out there around prompting, but today we're just going to focus on three that I find to be really helpful and impactful in my day-to-day work. So those are meta prompting, few shot prompting, and then chain of thought prompting. So first up, and this one is probably my personal favorite, is meta prompting. So meta prompting is all about using the model itself to improve the way that you ask questions. Instead of just trying to come up with the perfect prompt on your own, you can ask ChatGPT, what's the best way to phrase this question to get the output that I want? For example, on this slide, you can see an example of a user that's asking the model how to best phrase a request for creative writing exercises. And this approach is really helpful because it saves time and often generates really creative or unexpected prompt ideas that we might not naturally think of. helpful because it saves time and often generates really creative or unexpected prompt ideas that we might not naturally think of. Side. So let me switch over here. If you look on your left-hand sidebar, you'll see there is a GPTs section, and you can go ahead and click the Explore button, and that will give you the ability to actually search for these GPTs. So go ahead and type in ChatGPT use cases for work, and that should be the first one that will pop up for you. I already have it pulled up over here, but once you find that, you can select it and start messaging with it. And if this is something you want to use on a regular basis, you can always click on the title of the custom GPT and choose to show it in your sidebar or hide it from your sidebar so that you can easily find it later on. So, but now that we have this up here ready for us to use, we can go ahead and get started. And we've got just an easy button for us to go ahead and do that. So we'll click Let's Get Started. And I'm going to skip thinking mode for this scenario. We'll just turn on 5 so that we're not waiting for the responses here. But again, I might recommend that if you have some time on your hands, leveraging that thinking mode might provide you with some better prompts. So then the custom GPT is going to come back and ask us for a couple of pieces of information that will help guide it in giving us the best possible prompts for who we are and what we're trying to do. So it's looking for maybe my company name, my role, and just a few sentences about what I do, how I measured, anything that might be relevant for this custom GPT to know in order to craft some really good prompts for me. So to save us a little bit of time, since I am not good at talking and typing all at the same time, I have pre-copied this for myself. So I give it some of that information that it's asking for. I'm a solutions engineer at OpenAI. I, in particular, support government customers in their AI journey. I help them understand what our technology does, how it can serve their needs, and how they can securely adopt it to support their missions. I would recommend, if you're going through this process yourself, definitely take some time to fill this out in a little bit more detail. It would probably be helpful to include how you're measured in your role, some examples of work that you're doing right now, so that you get those more targeted responses versus this might be a little bit more generic. But we'll go ahead and send this in. And so pretty quickly, it comes back and it kind of sketches out its understanding of what my role is, what I might be responsible for in this role. And then it gives me a great list in a table format of starter prompts and use cases for me in particular. So it gives me some use cases around mission mapping, architecture, security and compliance, building demos and narratives for customers, capturing meeting notes, and then even learning and upskilling. And then it even gives me an understanding of kind of what it believes I do related to these scenarios. And it's pretty impressive to me how accurate a lot of this is compared to what I do on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, it gives me some sample prompts that I can try. So I, especially when I first started working at OpenAI, found this custom GPT to be an incredibly helpful way to just make sure that I was thinking about all of the different ways that ChatGPT can help me on a day-to-day basis. And it's actually something that I come back to pretty regularly because, of course, for most folks, your day-to-day work is not something that's very stagnant. You might be working on a new project this week compared to what you were doing last week. You might be working with different individuals in teams. A lot of times the work that we're doing day in and day out is very fluid. And as those initiatives and metrics and priorities evolve, there are always going to be new prompts that will be really valuable in helping us figure out exactly how we can get the most out of a tool like ChatGPT. So that is just one quick example on how everyone can get started on building some customized prompts for themselves. And you can, go back and forth with this custom GPT as well and offer some refinement if you want to get a little bit more detailed in your responses. But I highly recommend just taking a couple of minutes to run through this exercise. Like I mentioned, it's something that I do on a semi-regular basis. And there are certain prompts that I've gotten by using this approach that I just keep either on a sticky note on my computer or even physically on my desk so that I remember to go back to them and use them on a regular basis. All right, so with that in mind, just wanted to thank everyone for spending some time with us today. And I will now invite Jane back and we can dive into some of the Q&A that I'm sure has been coming in during this session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. We certainly do have a ton of questions, so I'm glad we have about 20 minutes to go through them. I welcome you all to continue submitting your questions, but can't guarantee because we do have a lot coming our way. So let's get started. All right, let's talk about prompt optimization and effectiveness. I know you walked through a lot of different frameworks today, Lauren. So we have some specific questions here. The first one being, what is your number one recommendation to optimize prompts for speed of processing? So just basically to get their answers quickly.
Yeah, so I know we mentioned this a little bit towards the beginning of this session, but with the introduction of GPT-5, the the default model in use is going to be 5 Auto, which is deciding for you on the back end kind of which version of itself it's going to use based on the question that you provided. So if you know that you want a fast response, you don't want to sit around waiting, then the best thing to do is go into the model picker at the top left of your screen, the little where it says GPT-5. You can drop that down and go ahead and select instant if you know you want a really fast response. But again, I would, if you're kind of worried about the output or you're not worried about time, think a problem that you're asking anywhere from like 3 to 15, 20 minutes. So there's no like perfect answer to this question, unfortunately, but think about the challenge that you're asking chat to solve and the amount of time that you're willing to wait for it and kind of split the difference that way.
Yep, that's great. All right, let's keep moving. I really like this question, and it's I'm curious to hear your answer. It's kind of like a myth busting question. So, love to hear about any prompting techniques that might be popular or like that you might have heard a lot about, but aren't actually like best practice. This is a bit.
I would say there are like two that immediately came to mind for me. One is saying please and thank you in your prompt. And I even sometimes do this just like without thinking about it because I feel like that's how I tend to speak to other human beings. But I mean, Sam Altman has come out and said this, like saying please and thank you and being overly polite does not really have any impact on the way that on how hard the model is going to work on your challenge.
Right.
So you can definitely leave those out and not worry about like getting bad responses because you're not being nice enough to the AI. So that's one that comes to mind. And then I think another thing that I see people do, I don't know if this would be really considered a technique, but I see a lot of people spend way too much time stressing about their prompt and feeling like they need to write the perfect prompt the first time around. You do not need to write a novel. I think as long as you are giving as much detail as you would give to a colleague that you're tasking with something like this, then that's pretty good. And it doesn't need to be, all grammatically correct and perfect sentences. So I think overthinking is actually the problem that I see more than anything, where people waste a lot of time. And that's why I think meta prompting is so powerful, because if I'm struggling to structure my request for chat, I'll just kind of like brain dump into chat GPT. And actually something that I like to do even more than like typing that out, because I tend to be lazy, especially towards like the end of the day or the week, is I'll just turn on voice mode of chat and just kind of brain dump, like, here's what I'm trying to do. I don't know how to phrase it. Like, help me.
Yeah.
And it will write the response for me and give me like a very well-structured prompt.
It's amazing how much chat can do with little or unorganized information, for sure. And that kind of goes into our next question. Someone asked, how important is it to give within your prompt a model to follow? So, for example, starting prompts with, you are an experienced software engineer, or you are a product manager, XYZ. Kind of like what you were just talking about. Like, is that really necessary, you think, to structure a good prompt? Or can we kind of just like take it back and keep it simple?
You definitely don't have to do that. And
Mhm.
like again, I think it always comes down to what you are trying to do. Like if you are trying to get just a baseline answer to a question that's fairly factual, you
Mhm.
don't need to give all of that information.
Audience questions on logistics and things like that. And so some folks were asking about replays. Will we have the slides available for this session? So we won't have the slides available, but this session will be available on replay. So visit back in a couple of days, the same event page that you registered on, and there should be a button that allows you to replay the session if you need to reference any of the materials that Lauren walked us through earlier today. And then another person asked about any, I think it was like not cheat codes, but something along those lines of like cheat sheets, and things like that. We have a ton of we have a ton of materials on the OpenAI Academy, prompt packs for different types of environments, whether you're at work, at home, whatever that might be. And so definitely check out the Academy for on-demand resources that can hopefully help you continue your learning and prompting journey. So with that being said, Lauren, let's just dive right back in. What's that?
There's one that I saw that I think would be good to address. So
Sure.
someone asked, as I've been using ChatGPT for a while and I'm now learning better ways to prompt, should I clear my past data to start fresh and avoid being influenced by earlier, less effective prompting habits? I like this question because I feel like it touches on the memory component of ChatGPT.
Yep.
So for those who, again, might be newer or less familiar with all of the capabilities, ChatGPT has something that we call memory, which you can enable or disable per your preferences. But if you have it enabled, you're basically giving ChatGPT the ability to kind of remember things about you so that it can keep those preferences and like style guidelines in mind. And I don't know that this should necessarily be impacting your prompting and the output itself. I think that like if you as a person have completely changed since you started using chat, it might be good to start fresh. But what I would actually recommend doing rather than like deleting your whole history, is you can actually go look into the memories that ChatGPT has about you within your own settings. So if you click on your name at the bottom left of ChatGPT, you can go into your personal settings, and I believe there's like a memory tab on the left-hand side, and it will actually show you the things that it's kind of like remembered about you, and you can clear some of those out if they are no longer relevant. But I don't think that that's really going to mess with your prompting in particular. Again, unless like for months on end, you were just accepting like let's say you were like only asking for bullet point responses and now you only want full sentences. It shouldn't have that big of an impact.
Great. I was doing some multitasking. I'm going to drop some prompt packs that we posted on the Academy. Someone was asking about prompting for work. And so I'm going to drop some resources into the chat that should help you get started depending on what role you have. So I'll do that in a second, but let's move on to some other questions that we received. This is a good question about like prompt development and iteration. How often should you ask ChatGPT for help in developing a prompt?
As often as you want to. I mean, I think I mentioned this when we were talking about meta prompting, but I use this all the time. I would say like for sure, anytime that I am going to use deep research or pro in particular, I always ask ChatGPT to help me with my prompt. Sometimes I'll even use it for like image generation because I feel like it gives me a good formula of how to be really detailed, because I find that image generation is a really good example of a scenario when you probably have an idea in your mind that you can visualize of what you're trying to get out of the tool, but you don't think about all of the little details that you're visualizing to explain those to ChatGPT. So an example there might be like, image of a person working in a coffee shop. And I might have this like idea in my mind of, an image that we can put on a small business poster of some sort, work as like marketing or advertisement. And if I don't give that context to ChatGPT of what I'm trying to use this image for, how I'm envisioning, am I looking for a human-like character, or am I envisioning more of like a, cartoon type character, or just iconography? Like, the tool is going to make guesses about that. So with something like image generation, sometimes I'll use instant mode to just ask for a recommendation. And that will sometimes even just remind me of like, oh, these are some good details that I should include. And the details chat might give me in its sample prompt might be way off from what I'm looking for, but that reminds me to go in and make those edits and give that supplemental detail and information. So there is no perfect formula here of like how many times a day should you be doing this. I would definitely encourage you to use it for the more like compute intensive tools like image generation, deep research, or using pro or even thinking mode.
Yeah, that's great. All right. I think we're like already like 5 minutes out to the hour. So let's pick like two more questions. I'll pick one, Lauren. How about that? And then you can pick the last one. Let's see. All right. How about this? How can we force GPT? I mean, force is probably a strong word, but how can we encourage ChatGPT to prompt back the user to clarify what's needed so that not so much of the prompt refinement is placed on the user? Is there a way for us to work with ChatGPT to ask follow-up questions back to the user for clarification?
Yeah, so two ways I would recommend doing this. One is you can actually give ChatGPT custom instructions on how to interact with you as a user. So again, if you go click on your name on the bottom left and then go into your settings and personalization, you can actually provide some instructions for ChatGPT on like not only what you want chat to call you, maybe you have a nickname, what tone you want it to use. Like, I like chat to be really supportive and helpful, but I have friends and colleagues that want it to be more like a tough love, like coach almost, that kind of not yells at them, but is like a little bit tougher on them. So you can set up like a specific tone that you want, but then you can give it those specific instructions as well. So for this person in particular, they might want to add into their instructions, always ask me follow-up clarifying questions before producing a response. And that will result in chat always asking clarifying questions. I think I probably would not recommend doing that in like your universal personalization settings, because there will probably be times when that starts to get really annoying when you just want, like, you're just looking for a fact and you want the answer right away.
Yeah.
I would actually recommend setting up instructions like that in either a custom GPT, if there is a specific use case that you have in mind, or you can even set that up in what we call a project. So this is like getting into some of our like 101 content. So if you have no idea what projects are, go sign up for one of our future 101 sessions. They are a way that you can organize your chats kind of in a folder system, but you can also set up instructions at the project level. So for a whole host of topics, you can actually, with any new chat in that project, it will always follow the instructions that you gave it. So if you do that at the project level, then any chat in that project will ask you clarifying questions, but like default chats will still behave as normal.
Awesome. Okay, I lied. I have one more question for you, and then if you want to choose one for yourself. But this is a pretty good question that I feel like I receive a lot. If I use both a private ChatGPT account and a corporate ChatGPT account from the same computer, can the context from those two accounts affect each other since both of them are like originating from the same computer and IP?
Nope. Yeah, if they are separate accounts, they are entirely separate. It's funny. I'm in disturbing number of ChatGPT environments between, our corporate one, my personal one, and then I have a lot of like
training,
ones and customer ones that I've set up. So I have
perennial gardening.
and I have like very different instructions and personas set up in each of those, and they do not mix. They don't bleed over. That all ties back into like also our security settings. So you can have multiple different accounts, and they're, what you do in your personal one is not somehow going to be surfaced in your work corporate one.
Great. I'll leave it to you to.
One other question that I saw that I think is interesting is when I start to talk about a long topic, is it best to keep talking in the same chat or export data and move into another one? So what can happen if you like keep working in the same chat window, like let's say you never start a new chat, eventually you're going to hit what we call the context window. So I think with GPT-5, we upped the context window to something like 750,000 tokens. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's pretty high though. But like a scenario that I found myself in once was I was troubleshooting a bunch of code back and forth with chat. And so I was sending in these huge blocks of code. Chat was coming back and helping me refine them. So we were like using up lots and lots of tokens in a short period of time. And I found after like an hour of this back and forth, chat like was kind of just all over the place in its responses, and it was not following my prior instructions. I started to notice some hallucinations. So when you hit that context window, you will start to just notice some like weird behavior where it's like losing the plot of what you talked about up front. So I find it honestly easiest for me to, mostly work in new chats on a pretty regular basis. The exception there being like if I started working on a demo talk track, yesterday and I didn't finish it, and now I'm working on it again today, I might go back into that same chat and just like keep following up the conversation. But I find it easier to just use projects to organize and use new chats on a pretty regular basis, because then the instructions are already saved.
Agree. Yeah, it can get pretty unruly pretty quickly. So projects are a lifesaver. All right. Well, we will cap it here. Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us today. Hopefully, everyone is walking away feeling a little more empowered on how to prompt more effectively with ChatGPT. We have a ton of resources on the Academy, like I said, on demand. And so if you have any questions about projects or even more about prompting, we have some on-demand videos that can go a little more in depth about all these topics. So take a look at our events page as well. We have some upcoming events where we will be doing another 101, like Lauren mentioned, on ChatGPT overall. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave those in the feedback form that will be sent out right after this event ends. So until then, thanks again for joining us, and we will see you at the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ian.